The message came in while I was halfway through my morning coffee. A simple vibration on my phone, nothing unusual, until I saw the sender. Family group. My heart skipped, a reflex I couldn't control. It had been weeks since anyone said a word in that chat. Then I opened it. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. For a second I thought I'd misread it. My thumb hovered above the screen as I blinked again, hoping it would rearrange into something less cruel. But the words stayed still, sharp and deliberate, sitting beneath my mother's name, and my father's blue checkmark confirming he'd read it too. My siblings were in the group. No one responded. Just a quiet digital silence, the kind that felt like the world itself had stopped to watch me break. I scrolled up, looking for context. Maybe I'd missed a thread, a warning, anything that would explain this public execution disguised as a message. But there was nothing. Just birthdays, recipes, and my brother's smug photos from their last family dinner, the one I wasn't invited to. My chest felt heavy, like someone had poured cement where my lungs should be. Take a step back, they said, as if I'd been pushing, begging for attention. I hadn't asked for much in months. No calls, no favors, just silence. Yet somehow even my distance offended them. I tried to remember the last time we'd spoken in person. The awkward visit when I'd brought dessert, and my mother had smiled thinly, saying, "You didn't need to." I remember how Dad barely looked up from his phone, and my brother joked about how some people thrive on drama. I had laughed then, pretending it didn't sting. Now it all made sense. That visit had been a test, one I'd already failed. I reread the message until the words blurred. They didn't even have the decency to text me privately. No explanation, no phone call. Just a sentence meant to erase me neatly, like deleting a name from a guest list. Take a step back for now. For now, as if my absence was temporary, like an inconvenience they hoped would fix itself. My hands can't remember a time when I wasn't standing just outside the circle, watching everyone else laugh. Even as a kid, I learned how to make myself small, to take up as little space as possible. My brother Daniel was the golden one. He could spill juice on the carpet and be called spirited, while I could breathe too loudly and get scolded for being dramatic. I used to wonder if I was born with something missing, some invisible mark that told them I wasn't enough. At 7, I discovered that praise was currency in our house. Daniel collected it effortlessly, every soccer goal, every smirk, every A on a test. I chased scraps of approval like they were gold coins. When I helped Mom in the kitchen, she'd smile distractedly, her mind already on Daniel's science fair. When I brought home drawings, she'd say, "That's nice, honey," and pin his medals above them on the fridge. Dad was worse. He'd pat Daniel's back like a proud coach, but when it came to me, his words were always measured. "You should learn from your brother," he'd say. Not cruelly, just matter-of-factly, as though it were a natural truth. And so I tried. I studied harder, volunteered, made fewer mistakes. I learned to fold laundry perfectly, to laugh when I was left out, to take the smaller slice of cake and call it my choice. I became the quiet one, the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who never asked for too much. When fights broke out, and they often did, I'd be the one smoothing over the tension, whispering apologies that weren't mine to give. Mom used to call me her little diplomat, but what she really meant was the one who knows her place. The holidays were the worst. Daniel's gifts were wrapped in gold paper, mine in leftover scraps. On the surface, we looked like the kind of family that had it all together. My mother's social media was a highlight reel. Filtered dinners, matching sweaters, holiday smiles so polished they could have been in a catalog. "Family time is everything," she'd caption, every post glowing with love and togetherness. I used to stare at those photos, the ones that gathered hundreds of likes, and wonder if anyone noticed that I was never in them. At first, I thought it was an accident. Maybe I'd missed the dinner. Maybe they'd forgotten to tag me. But as the pattern repeated, birthdays, vacations, even small Sunday brunches, I realized it wasn't oversight. It was omission. They were curating an image of a perfect family, and my presence didn't fit the aesthetic. I was the shadow outside the frame, the reminder that not everything in their smiling world was flawless. It became a ritual. Mom would post a new photo, Daniel's arm slung around her, Dad grinning at the head of the table. I'd feel the familiar sting, then scroll through the comments. What a beautiful family. So much love here. Each heart emoji felt like a tiny cut, a public confirmation that the version of us online was the one they'd chosen to believe. I didn't confront her about it. What would I say? Why am I not in your fake family posts? She'd only twist it, make me sound ungrateful or dramatic. So instead, I swallowed it. The humiliation, the ache of being erased in plain sight. I stopped checking her page, but somehow the photos always found me. A friend would send a screenshot, a cousin would mention a gathering, and the quiet truth would surface again. They moved on without me. The hardest part wasn't the exclusion itself. I'd grown used to that. It was the realization that they wanted me invisible, even to the world, that their love was performative, a stage act for likes and validation. The same people who once said family above all had edited me out like a blemish. One night, after seeing yet another post, my parents at a family dinner, all smiles, candles glowing. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, feeling something new. Not rage, not even sadness, just a kind of emptiness that felt almost clean. I realized I was done begging to be seen. The next day, I called my friend Maya, the only person who'd ever noticed how carefully I tiptoed around my family. She listened quietly, then said, "You keep trying to earn their love like it's a prize. It's not. It's supposed to be a given." Her words sank deep. I'd spent my whole life chasing approval like it was oxygen, never realizing I could simply choose to breathe without it. That night, I muted the group chat. I didn't delete it, not yet. But I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. For the first time, I felt the faintest trace of peace. Maybe moving on didn't have to be loud. Maybe it could be as quiet as closing an app and deciding not to check if they noticed I was gone. The night it happened, I told myself it would be fine. Just one dinner, just one evening where I'd try again, to belong, to be part of the family I kept convincing myself still wanted me. It was my father's birthday, a small gathering at their house. When I arrived, everyone was already there. Wine glasses half full, laughter spilling out of the dining room like music from a world I was never invited into. Mom smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile that stopped at the surface. "Oh, you made it," she said like I was an unexpected guest, not her daughter. My seat was at the far end of the table, squeezed between an empty chair and a decorative plant. Daniel sat near Dad, his arm around his fiancée basking in their attention. Halfway through dinner, Mom stood to give a toast. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "To the people who always show up, who make us proud, who keep us strong." The room clinked with cheers and laughter. I lifted my glass halfway, waiting, foolishly, for my name, for any sign that I was part of that family she spoke about. But she turned to Daniel instead, smiling. "And to Daniel," she added, "for being the kind of son any parent would be lucky to have." Everyone applauded. Even Dad got teary-eyed. My name wasn't mentioned. My contribution forgotten. I froze, smile fixed, throat burning. When I tried to join the next photo, Mom said lightly, "Oh, sweetie, can you take this one for us? You have the best angle." I did. I stood there holding the phone steady as they posed. Perfect lighting, perfect smiles, perfect lie. My hands shook just enough to blur the shot. For a second, I thought Mom might notice, might ask if I was okay. She didn't. She just told me to take another. That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't invisible by accident. I was erased on purpose. My family didn't forget me. They chose not to see me. Every polite smile, every casual exclusion, every missing seat was intentional. After dessert, I slipped out quietly. No one stopped me. No one noticed the empty chair by the plant. I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement, the night air sharp with silence. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, tired, hollow but strangely calm. As I drove away, I realized this was my emotional rock bottom, the exact moment I stopped trying to fit into a picture they'd already edited me out of. I wasn't leaving a family anymore. I was escaping a performance, I didn't reply to the message. I read it once, twice, then again until the words blurred. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. It was signed by no one, but written by everyone. I stared at the screen, waiting for someone, Mom, Dad, even Daniel, to realize how cruel that sounded. But no second message came, just silence. So I gave them silence back. Days turned into weeks. My phone stayed still, notifications few and far between. At first, it was torture. I checked my messages obsessively, replaying imaginary conversations in my head. Maybe they'd apologize, or at least explain. Instead, I heard from cousins, awkward check-ins wrapped in gossip. Your mom said you're taking time for yourself, one text read. Translation: You've been exiled and we're all pretending it's self-care. It stung, but something shifted inside me. For the first time, I stopped waiting for their permission to exist. I started waking up earlier, walking without my phone, making coffee without scrolling through their perfect family photos. The silence, that once felt suffocating, began to sound like peace. One afternoon, while clearing my old desk, I found sketches and notes from a project I'd abandoned years ago, an idea for a handmade candle business. I'd shelved it back when Mom told me it was cute, but not practical. Holding those papers now, I felt a pulse of defiance. So I started. Slowly. Messily. I watched tutorials, burned my first few batches, filled my apartment with the scent of lavender and resilience. The work was small but grounding. Each order, each label, each late night with wax-stained fingers reminded me that I was building something no one could take credit for, or erase. My inner voice changed too. I stopped narrating my life as a victim's story and began speaking to myself like a survivor. I wasn't the daughter left out of photos. I was the woman learning how to frame her own. The family chat stayed unread. I didn't need to open it anymore. The version of me they decided to take a step back from didn't exist. The new one was too busy stepping forward. It had been nearly 4 months since that group message, long enough for the sting to fade into something dull and manageable. My candle business had started gaining traction. A few repeat customers, a small feature on a local blog. I'd begun to feel, for the first time in years, that my life was fully mine. So when my phone rang one afternoon, and I saw Daniel's name flash across the screen, my heart sank. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe old habit, won. His voice came out tight, breathless. Hey, we need to talk. It's Mom and Dad. They're in trouble. For a second, I thought he was exaggerating. My parents had built their lives around control. Financial, social, emotional. Trouble wasn't a word they allowed into their vocabulary. But then he explained. Dad's investment had collapsed, taking most of their savings with it. Worse, the local community, the one they'd spent decades impressing, had found out. Apparently, people they once flaunted their wealth to were now gossiping about their fall from grace. And now they want me to fix it? I asked, already knowing the answer. He hesitated. You're good with money. You've got that business thing going. They said maybe you could help them. Restructure, or, just figure it out. I laughed. Not kindly, more like disbelief bursting through a lifetime of restraint. They told me to take a step back, Daniel. Funny how short that step becomes when they're the ones falling. He sighed. Look, I know they messed up, but they're scared. Mom's been crying, Dad's. Well, you know how he gets. Just talk to them, okay? After we hung up, I sat there, phone heavy in my hand. My first instinct was anger, the kind that tightens your chest and reminds you of every dismissal, every missed birthday, every moment you swallowed your pride just to be tolerated. But beneath it, there was something else. Clarity. They didn't call because they'd changed. They called because they needed something. The same family that had erased me from their lives now wanted my help rebuilding theirs. It was almost poetic. The universe's quiet way of saying, your absence mattered more than your presence ever did. That night, I walked through my tiny studio, candles flickering in soft gold light, and thought about the irony. I'd built something small and steady, while they'd built something grand and hollow. And now, for the first time, they were standing where I used to stand, outside, looking in. I didn't rush to call back. I wanted them to feel what silence really sounded like. Not the kind you weaponize to punish someone, but the kind that teaches you humility. When I finally did decide to answer, it wouldn't be as the daughter desperate to be seen. It would be as the woman they never believed I could become. When I finally agreed to meet them, it wasn't out of pity or curiosity. It was closure. I chose a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place I used to walk past when I couldn't afford a coffee. I arrived early, ordered my drink, and sat by the window. The sunlight caught the edge of my watch, the one I'd bought to celebrate my business hitting its first major profit goal. It wasn't about luxury. It was proof that I'd built something with my own hands, without anyone's approval. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. My father's posture, usually so stiff, commanding, seemed smaller. My mother's perfect hair was slightly out of place, her smile too practiced. They approached like diplomats entering a negotiation, not parents greeting their daughter. "Sweetheart," Mom said, reaching out as if the past few months hadn't happened. "You look different." "I feel different," I said softly. And it was true. The air between us had shifted. I wasn't the invisible one anymore, the one who kept shrinking to fit their comfort. I was centered, grounded, unshaken. They began with pleasantries, how the weather had been unpredictable, how they'd been so busy lately. But beneath the small talk was something else. Discomfort. My silence unsettled them. For once, I wasn't trying to fill it. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Your brother mentioned your business. Seems like you're doing well for yourself." "I am," I replied, taking a slow sip of coffee. "It's been good for me." He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "We've hit a bit of a rough patch, financially speaking. We just thought maybe, if you had any advice." I let him finish. I didn't rush to rescue. I didn't minimize their pain the way they'd minimized mine. I just listened, calmly, almost clinically, as they explained how their investments had gone wrong, how ungrateful people had stopped returning their calls. Mom's voice cracked at one point. "It's humiliating, you know? After everything we've done for everyone." I wanted to feel sympathy, but all I could think about was that message. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. The irony was almost painful. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said quietly. "It must be hard being pushed away when you need support." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, as if she understood exactly what I was saying. The conversation continued, awkward and stilted. They asked about my business again, about my apartment, about the friends I'd made. Every question carried a strange mix of curiosity and regret. They were realizing, piece by piece, that the daughter they'd dismissed had become someone they could no longer control or impress. As I stood to leave, Mom reached for my hand. "It's good to see you like this," she said. Her tone tried to sound warm, but there was something else beneath it, a quiet grief for the power they'd lost. I smiled gently. "It's good to be like this." Walking out of that cafe, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The dynamic had finally flipped. I wasn't the child waiting to be chosen anymore. I was the adult choosing what and who deserved a place in my peace. The invitation came under the guise of reconciliation, a family meeting at my parents' lawyer's office. They said it was about settling some affairs, and though part of me suspected an ulterior motive, I went anyway. I wasn't nervous this time. I'd learned that distance could do what confrontation never could. It gave me perspective and power. When I entered the conference room, the atmosphere was formal, polished, and tense. My parents sat at the head of the table, Daniel beside them, flipping through a stack of documents. The lawyer, a gray-haired man with an unshakable calm, nodded politely when I arrived. There were others present too, distant relatives, maybe business partners, people my parents often paraded around to maintain their image of control. "Thank you for coming," my father began. His voice carried the familiar edge of authority, though it wavered just slightly. "We're here to discuss some restructuring of assets. We've had complications. That was his word for collapse. As he spoke, I noticed the way everyone's eyes darted toward me when certain financial figures were mentioned. Percentages, holdings, properties. I stayed quiet, composed. I knew exactly where this was going. The lawyer finally cleared his throat. To clarify, the property at Crestwood and the accounts tied to the holding company, those are no longer in Mr. or Mrs. Hale's name. He paused, glancing at me. They belong to Ms. Hale. For a moment, there was silence so sharp it felt like sound had been sucked out of the room. My mother blinked, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" The lawyer repeated, steady as ever. "Your daughter is the majority stakeholder. She purchased the liens and assumed ownership through a third-party investment trust. It's all legitimate, fully documented." Whispers rippled through the room. Daniel's jaw dropped. My father's hand clenched the armrest. My mother looked like she'd swallowed glass. I didn't gloat. I simply sat back, hands folded, and met their eyes. "You said you wanted to restructure. I thought I'd make things simpler." Dad's voice was low, brittle. "You bought it? You own it?" "Yes," I said. "A while back I saw the property was about to default. It felt like a good investment. I didn't realize until later just how personal it would become." He looked ready to argue, to reclaim control. But every word he might have used dissolved before it reached his lips. The power dynamic that had defined my entire life, their dominance, my deference, had evaporated. Mom's eyes welled, though not with pride. "You could have told us. You could have trusted me," I replied gently. The lawyer moved on to logistics, but no one was really listening. The shock was too thick, the reversal too complete. I could feel the unspoken questions bouncing around the table. How? When? Why her? I didn't explain. I didn't owe them that story. When the meeting ended, people began murmuring in the hall. My name mixed with disbelief, curiosity, maybe even respect. I walked past them slowly, head high. For years, I had been the invisible one. The extra chair at dinner, the forgotten birthday, the afterthought. But now, in this quiet, undeniable way, I had become the foundation they were standing on. And that, I realized, was the sweetest kind of justice. Not revenge that screams, but power that simply exists, silent and absolute. It happened a few days after the meeting. My mother called first, her voice quiet, uncertain, stripped of the smooth confidence she used to wear like perfume. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Just us." We met at their house, the same one that once felt like a museum of everything I wasn't. The air smelled of furniture polish and wilted flowers, the remnants of a life polished for appearances. They were both there, waiting in the living room. My father looked older than I remembered, not in years, but in defeat. He stood when I walked in. "We owe you an apology," he began, glancing at my mother as if for strength. "For how we treated you, for letting things go too far." My mother nodded, eyes glistening. "We thought we were pushing you to be stronger. We didn't see how unfair we were, how cruel sometimes." It was the kind of apology I used to dream of hearing, back when I still thought one could heal everything. But now, standing there, it didn't feel like a door reopening. It felt like a page finally closing. "I appreciate that," I said softly. "But you have to understand, Weiss, it wasn't about one thing. It was years of feeling like I didn't belong in my own family. Mom wiped her eyes. We see that now. We can't take it back, but maybe we can start over? Her voice trembled on start over, and for a moment I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe we could rewind and rewrite the story, but too much had changed, mostly me. I don't hate you, I said, and I'm not angry anymore, but I can't go back to who I was, the version of me that needed to be small, just to stay close. My father exhaled, shoulders sinking. We just want you in our lives. I'll always care, I replied, but being in your lives can't mean losing mine. Silence hung between us, heavy but clean. There was no shouting, no bitterness, just the truth, sitting quietly where love used to be conditional. When I left, my mother followed me to the door. You've become someone we don't even recognize, she said, half in awe, half in regret. I smiled gently. That's because for the first time, I'm finally me. Driving away, I didn't feel triumph or vengeance. What I felt was peace. Not because they had apologized, but because I no longer needed them to. I didn't tell anyone what happened that day. There were no dramatic speeches, no social media revelations, no cinematic endings. I simply let the moment breathe and then moved on. Revenge had once felt like the finish line, the thing that would make the years of neglect make sense. But now I understood something deeper. Power wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in no longer needing to. For weeks afterward, I found myself thinking about that message. We think it's best if you take a step back for now. It used to haunt me, a symbol of rejection. But now it sounded like something else entirely, a strange kind of prophecy. Because stepping back had become the very thing that saved me. Distance had given me clarity, silence had given me control, and solitude had given me strength. I had learned that not every wound demands a war, and not every betrayal deserves an answer. Sometimes the most devastating statement is to live well, quietly, steadily, on your own terms. There was a time I would have called or written back, trying to explain myself, trying to make them understand. But understanding was never the goal anymore. Peace was. Now, when I see their names light up my phone, I pause. Not from fear or bitterness, but from choice. I decide when to answer, if at all. That, I've realized, is its own kind of freedom. Silence used to feel like punishment. Now it feels like power, calm, measured, undeniable. As I watched the sunset one evening, the world painted gold and soft. I whispered to myself, almost smiling, sometimes, stepping back is the most powerful move of all. And for the first time, I believed it completely. It came on a quiet Sunday evening, the same familiar group chat that had once shattered me. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and there it was. We'd love to see you at dinner. No explanations, no apologies, no promises, just an invitation. For a moment, I stared at the screen, feeling the echo of that first message months ago. Back then, those same words, take a step back, had knocked the wind out of me. I'd spent nights replaying them, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have said differently. But now the silence around me felt warm, not empty. The walls of my apartment weren't lonely anymore. They were mine. I made a cup of tea and leaned against the counter, reading the message again. It wasn't bitterness that kept me from replying. It was peace. I didn't need to prove that I'd forgiven them, or that I'd moved on. The truth was simpler. I had nothing left to prove. I thought about how they might sit around the dinner table that night, leaving an extra chair open, waiting. Maybe they'd wonder if I'd changed my number. Maybe they'd finally feel the space I once felt sitting right beside them. I smiled. Not a vengeful smile, but one of quiet knowing. They would never understand how powerful it felt to choose silence over explanation, distance over approval. Outside, the evening light softened against the window. My reflection looked calm, steady, someone I barely recognized from the girl who used to beg to be seen. I set my phone face down on the counter, letting the notification fade to black. No anger, no triumph, just peace. The camera would have lingered there, maybe catching the faint curve of my lips as I exhaled. Not victory, not revenge, just freedom. For the first time, being left out didn't hurt. It felt like home.